beauties of life, and it's taxes. And we're looking at the tax regime in Ghana and what the various parties have to say about what happens with taxes. It's GH debates, and represented today are the MPP, the CPP, and the NDC. So stay with us, don't go anywhere. GH debates right now.
All right, so what's your own assessment of the tax policies of current administration, the NDC administration? And indeed, how best do you think that we can be able to put all of this together sustainably, you know, to move forward our development as a country? That is our conversation. So whatever the questions, all your representation are here. The political party representations are here. We have the NPP, we have the NDC, we have the CPP. 3 of them are here today. What are your specific questions for them, if any of them are here for you? What do you want to hear from them? So that is our conversation on GH Debates. Our guests are seated, and we have, indeed, they all are parliamentary aspirants. We have here now Mr. George Anda. Mr. George Anda seeks... Well, Mr. George Anda seeks the parliamentary seat for the Ewutu Senya West, and Kweku Kwansa represents CPP, also looking to represent the people of the Ayawaso West. Wogong. He's so sure of unseating Mr. Emmanuel Ejako. We're yet to see that happen. But let me also say that we will be joined on this debate by Samuel Nate George, NDC parliamentary candidate for Ningo Pram Pram. So our guests, let me say a very big welcome to Mr. Anda and Mr. Kwansa. Thank you for joining us.
Okay.
The name is Nini George.
Nini George Anda.
Yes. It's very important that you add the Nini at this particular time.
Thank you.
One time, for strategic reasons.
Exactly.
And George, you want to unseat the foreign minister?
I think the people of Ewutu Senya West want me to lead them to unseat the foreign minister.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right, good. And yours is quite a tough task to, you have quite interesting people in that Ayawaso West Wogon constituency. Who are your main targets?
Well, the main target is the incumbent.
Okay. In the person of?
Honorable Ejako.
Okay, all right.
And I'm told it's a tough challenge. So we're doing everything we can. We're trying to reach the people with our message.
Okay.
And let the message lead
all right.
in the election.
Okay. So let me just explain the mechanics of the debate. So we have 3 rounds. So the first round is a 7-minute round. You get 7 minutes to speak to the issues. Second round is a 5-minute round. And then in the third round, we'll take questions from the viewers, and you also have a chance to punch holes in the arguments of your fellow debaters. It's as simple as that. 7-5-3. And when we say it's time to wrap up, well, you wrap up on the last sentence and then let us continue with the debate. So that's simple as that. We're expecting Mr. Sam George from the NDC to join us pretty soon. But we're going to start, first of all, with the candidates that we have. We're going to start with the MPP.
Indeed.
Yes.
Let me begin with Nini
George
Anda.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're looking basically about the current tax regimes that we have. Today we're taxing pensions, and we're going to be looking as well at other sectors of the economy when it comes to taxing. But let us get the NPP's own track record when it comes to tax policies.
I think as far as the MPP's track record when it comes to tax policy is concerned, it's pretty straightforward. We believe in backloading our taxes. We don't believe in front-loading the taxes. The current situation that we find ourselves in, it's a situation where the current government seems to be doing a lot of front-loading. We are saying that to a large extent, this government is bereft of ideas, and so the main things that this government does is to go and borrow money and then to tax the citizens. And we believe that fundamentally there's a big error as far as that is concerned. You recall that when the MPP were in power, we actually abolished the taxes of handsets. we brought the taxes on talk time to a certain low level. You have a situation now when this government has reintroduced the taxes on handsets. You have a situation now when this government has increased taxes on talk time. You have a situation where this government is taxing education, is taxing healthcare. You have a situation where this government is taxing farming inputs, and basically everything that should be boosting production is being taxed. What we are saying as MPP is to reverse the situation. So don't make it difficult for businesses to operate. Don't front load the taxes, okay? Rather, put the taxes at the end so that you can boost production, and then you can then tax the revenue that they are making from the production that has been boosted. And you create a situation where your industries become much more competitive as far as production is concerned. Right now, when you front load the taxes, you make business very, very unattractive, you make business very, very uncompetitive. There's the utility tariffs that increase that we are seeing, a significant proportion of that is on taxes. The fuel prices that are going up, a significant proportion of that is on taxes. If you recall, when we were in power, we reduced corporate tax from around 32% to 25%. And we clearly would also come down when we come into power. We think that with corporate tax down at 20%, you can even still get significant revenue to plug in whatever shortfalls and to drive the infrastructure development or whatever development or priority government agenda that you need to drive. So in a nutshell, what we are saying in the MPP is that we do not believe that this government has got it right. We believe that the front loading of taxes is a very, very wrong policy to be driving. We believe that they should look at it and they should reverse it. There's no point in making life difficult for the ordinary Ghanaian. Okay, we need to reverse the issue of front-loading taxes and then look at back-loading taxes. We need to improve the efficiency of tax collection, of course, widen the tax net so that you and I, those of us watching or those of us here who are not paying our taxes, are motivated and are encouraged to pay our taxes. I don't know whether you want me to go into the issue of the pensions now. Okay. Now on the issue of the pensions, there's a clear bit of confusion between the finance minister and what the president is saying. If you read the tax law, the 2015 tax law, you realize clearly, and I don't want to go into my time with that, but I'm sure you as the host, you can get it and then I can send it to you. You can see clearly that there is an indication that pensions can be taxed. Now, if you put this against what the Constitution of Ghana says, and in Article 199, okay, it states clearly that pensions should not be taxed. So you wonder why the PNDC will pass a law that is in contradiction to what the Constitution of Ghana says. And I guess that is why Alhaji Dr. Baumia will keep on saying that this government seems to be a confused government, because the Minister of Finance is saying one thing and the President is saying another thing. But obviously, at a cabinet level, this type of disconnect should not have come out. Okay? So we as MPP will not tax pensions. And I repeat, the MPP will not tax pensions. We'll be consistent with what the Constitution of Ghana says as far as pensions are concerned. We will not tax pensions and we will not make life unbearable for the Ghanaian. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Nenyi, George, and you still have some time left, but if you want to,
then maybe I can go through the actual yes. If you go through, let me read what the Pension Act says. Okay, the Pension Act, it says that taxation. Okay, the Income Tax Act says that taxation of retirement funds, 95 Section 1. Where the income derived by a person from an interest in the retirement fund for a year of assessment is to be ascertained, the person doing the calculation shall, A, exclude from the income a retirement payment made by the resident fund in respect of that interest, and the payment excluded shall not be regarded as consideration received for that interest, and B, include in the income a gain from an interest in a non-resident retirement fund. And 2, for the purpose of this section, gain from an interest in a non-resident fund means that the extent to which the retirement funds made by the fund to the beneficiary in respect of the interest of the fund shall, in the interest of the fund, exceed the retirement contribution paid to the fund by the contributor or on behalf of the contributor. Now, this section clearly states that per the tax law, the gain on pension placed on non-resident funds are to be taxed. You realize that per this law, then it means that those gains are to be taxed. But however, when you come to the Constitution of Ghana, 199, it's about retiring age of pensions. The first point is that a public officer shall accept as otherwise provided in this Constitution, shall accept or otherwise provided in this Constitution, retire from the public service on attaining the age of 62. The officer may except as otherwise provided in this Constitution, retire from the public service at any time after attaining the age of 45 years. Now, 3, this is the most important one. The pension payable to any person shall be exempt from tax. This is the Constitution. Okay, so clearly you cannot have a situation where there's a law that gives the opportunity for pensions to be taxed, which is in clear contradiction with the Constitution of Ghana. And that is why Alhaji Dr. Bawumia says that this government is in a state of confusion. It's the Kakamutobi economy that he keeps on referring to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nenyi George Anda speaks for the NPP. This is GH Debates on GH1 TV. We're going to go straight to the NDC candidate for this debate. His name is Sam Nati George. Good morning, Sam.
Hi, good morning.
Welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
Give you the quick mechanics of the debate. So the first round, 7 minutes to address the issue. Second round is 5 minutes. And third round, we'll take questions from the viewers, as well as you can also punch holes in whatever arguments you've heard from your fellow debaters. It's as simple as that, straight. We're focusing on taxes, the tax regime in Ghana. And we have 7 minutes to defend the NDC's tax regime and make any points you have. That's your camera over there. 7 minutes. You start right now.
All right. A very good morning to you, the host, and then to my colleague panelists on the show, and to our very good viewers who are watching us across the country. I believe that when it comes to the issues of tax policies and the issues that we face as both individuals and corporate entities, the stakes are pretty clear to us. The attempt by some sections of the political establishment to befuddle the matters and muddy the waters, create confusions in the minds of people is rather sad and will not achieve much. I think that we are pretty clear what our tax laws are in this country. We're clear what the Constitution of Ghana is. We've, as a government, been challenged and faced with very, very critical decisions that we have to make. In fact, the NDC administration, or the NDC, even in the first administration of President Rawlings, took some very critical decisions in terms of taxes. One key one, which has led to, which many of us are beneficiaries of, is the GET Fund, which was a tax that was, the GET Fund, which was set up basically as a product of a taxation, the VAT, and then the GET Fund levy that was introduced by the President Rawlings administration. I'm sure that many of our viewers will remember the Kumik Preko demonstrations that were led by the flag bearer of the NPP at the time, the current flag bearer of the NPP, who at that time was a leading member of the NPP, against the Kumik Preko demonstrations and the claims that were made about the introduction of VAT. In fact, there was a suggestion that it was going to be scrapped when they came into power. Unfortunately, 4 people lost their lives during that demonstration. However, we saw that it was just a talk shop, and when they came into power, they actually increased the VAT by 5%. 2.5% direct increase on VAT and an introduction of a 2.5% NHIL levy. That goes to tell us that the introduction of taxes in itself are not a bad thing to do. In fact, across the world, governments are only able to develop the nation on the back of taxes. And so you want to see the NPP claim that they introduced national health insurance. They did it on the back of the introduction of a tax, a 2.5 NHIL levy, which is basically the backbone by which you can run the national health insurance scheme. I spoke about the GET Fund, the fact that there's hardly any tertiary institution in this country or second cycle institution in this country that hasn't benefited from the GET Fund. The GET Fund is as a result of a tax that has been imposed on us. under this administration, you look at the introduction of certain taxes recently on energy or on the utilities, and it has to do with legacy debts that have been accrued over the period. Now you ask yourself, if subsequent governments or previous governments had done the right thing, taking the politically expedient decision to ensure that our utilities were working at optimum efficiency in terms of revenue mobilization, in terms of power distribution and cutting down energy losses, would we have raked up close to 5 billion Ghana cedis? That's about 1.2 billion US dollars in legacy debts owed to the utility companies. Absolutely not. We will not have done that. And so the question is, you are faced as a government with the inefficiency and lack of political will on the part of previous governments to, and this is a collective blanket thing, it cuts across all previous governments, irrespective of whichever political party it was, to focus and tackle some of the most critical issues we're facing. And this is threatening the sustainability of our utilities and utilities deliveries. As a government, we've taken a tough decision. Introduction of an energy levy to retire the legacy debts of 5 billion Ghana cedis which exist. Is it a tough call? Yes, it is a tough call. Will our country be better for it? Yes, our country will be better for it. The Mahama administration is one that is able to take the tough decisions that will inure to the interest of this country. We will not engage in cheap political meandering to score cheap political points. And when we achieve the power from the people, we will renege on our promises. We're going to stick to our plan. We're going to stick to our promises. I mean, our brothers on the other side, the NPP, have a track record of making very, very enticing promises in terms of taxes and failing to live up to those taxes. We remember in 2000 at Fadama, President Kufuor, quintessential, that image of him holding a gallon of fuel and basically shedding tears that 6,400 Ghana cedis, 64 pesos we know today, at that time, was too much for us to buy a gallon of fuel. In 365 days of him being president, he increased it from 6,400 to 10,000 and moving on to 20,000. Under the 8-year administration of his government, for 6 years, they took a toll debt recovery levy. He had to take Professor Mills to come and clear that debt. We never saw accountability for the toll debt recovery levy. This is a government that has a proven track record of showing to the Ghanaian people that when we tax people, we use the taxes, the revenues from the taxes, for what they ought to be used for. Typical example, petroleum sector. Many Ghanaians forget or have forgotten that when President Mahama took over the reins of government on the 7th of January 2013, we used to have fuel queues in this country. That as recently as 2014, people had monies in their pockets but didn't have petrol to buy in this country. People forget that as recently as 2014, our chop bars and restaurants were closing down because there was no gas for them to cook. President Mahama took a tough decision. Let's deregulate that sector. When was the last time you saw any fuel queues? When was the last time you saw any queues for gas? That is the kind of decision we're taking with the energy sector. Yesterday, I was at MOBEX 16 with His Excellency the President, and in giving his opening his speech to open the MOBEX, the Mobile Expo and ICT Expo at Accra International Conference Center, he relived the days when he took the tough decision to deregulate our telecom sector, and how at that time, with the Honorable Edward Salia, people suggested that deregulating telecoms at the time was going to create all kinds of problems for the country, and there were going to be job losses. Today, the telecom sector employs about 100 times more than P&T of old used to employ. That's exactly what we're trying to do with the utilities at this time. And I'm sure that by the time we're able to deregulate and take away monopoly in terms of revenue collection in our utility sectors, again, you realize the full effect of the taxes that have been imposed on us by government to clear our legacy debts and be able to make sure that our utilities function at a better position. Coming to the issues, in wrapping up, coming to the trending issue of taxes on pensions, I'm shocked and gobsmacked at, my time is up?
Your time is up. Just wrap it up quickly.
Okay, wrap it up. I'm shocked and gobsmacked at the twist that is being put up here. The finance minister has at no point in time suggested or made any claim that government is going to be taxing pensions and allowances. Government has never made that position. It is not our position. It is not in tandem with the Constitution, 1992 Constitution of Ghana. And if there's any confusion and incompetence anywhere. It is clearly in the minds of the flag bearer and his running mate of the NPP.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Samuel Nate George, some George probably known, and you are the NDC's parliamentary candidate for Ningo. Ningo. Indeed. Well, so you said the government is not taxing pensions.
We have absolutely not made any such suggestions.
We'll deal with that in the third round.
Indeed. Yes. So let me come to you, Mr. Kwanzaa. So Kweku Kwanzaa is representing the CPP at Ayahuasca West Wogon. You want to go into Parliament. Okay, so tell us, what is the CPP's own, policies as far as tax is concerned like?
Okay. I think before delving into our specific policies, I'd like to point out the fundamental difference between the CPP and the two other political parties. Because when I say a fundamental difference, I'm talking about the fact that both parties pursue virtually the same policy when it comes to development. When you hear of development in as being purported by these two parties, you hear of stabilization of the interest rate, you hear of sustaining debt, and then you hear of things like market stabilization. These are prescriptions. These are more or less Western prescriptions that have been imposed on us. Why have they been imposed on us? Because typically the way we have developed this country is to take on debt. So what are taxes for? Typically in a country, taxes are what you use to develop your roads, your infrastructure, social services, to keep the lights on, etc. Instead, in this country, we've taken on debt. So we have debt to import not just crude oil, but even refined products, debt to import food, debt to import anything you can imagine that we consume in this country, debt to build infrastructure. And then the even more interesting thing is that after we've taken on debt and we've written out a budget, we take on a debt to support the budget, which is the balance of payment support. So it means that you've set out to do these projects. You know that your income, which is the income in terms of your productive sector or your taxes, is a certain amount, and you realize that there's a deficit. To make up the deficit, you take on another loan to bridge that gap. So now let's ask ourselves, if you're running a business where for your business you're virtually not producing anything, but you take on a loan, and while you take on a loan, you have to support an office. You have to buy office supplies, pay workers, etc. Once you've done that, you still don't produce. So you have to take on loans at the end of the month. So the tax system is a unique way to now find a new set of people to exploit, which is the Ghanaian people. Is if we can tack on one more CD to your electricity bill, we will be able to support this debt. And it's not paying off the debt, but paying off the interest on the debt. So we're able to support the interest payment on debt A so that it allows us to keep our credit rating to take on debt B. So virtually, as we move on year on, we build on our principal debt rather than reducing it. And the people are saddled with the repercussions. So we have to ask ourselves, where does the cycle end? Where does this vicious cycle end? The vicious cycle doesn't seem to end because governments need to show face and need to show that they're doing projects. So every time you hear of a project commissioning or a fanfare to commission a big road or a large airport, etc., ask yourself, where is the money coming from? What are we producing as a country? Fundamentally, as a country, Ghana, what are we producing? If we're not producing, but yet we're commissioning projects, know that we're taking on debt, and that debt needs to be paid for. How will it be paid for? It will be paid for with taxes on the phone calls you make through the communications service tax. It will be taxed at the pump. It will be taxed at the ports. It will be taxed on your electricity and virtually everything that you consume. So when there's this talk of broadening or widening the tax net, indirectly we're all being taxed. Every single Ghanaian is already being taxed, and taxed to almost a point that obliterates our capacity to develop. our capacity to produce. An economy that relies or is very subservient to the debt system and very subservient to on taking on debt and not producing will always be saddled with the issue of raising taxes for its citizens. If we wanted to take a different perspective, which is the route of the CPP, we would produce. It sounds very simplistic, but if we are not able to produce the things that we consume, and what are these things? We're talking about food, energy, the things, clothing, and even shelter. If we're not able to produce these goods for our people, we have to borrow. And if we borrow, we have to pay for these debts. So what has been the position of these two parties on this matter? It's been very easy to take on a debt because to set up, and I'd always like to translate into a private business. It's easier to walk into the bank, send a few papers, and get some money, rather than to go back and structure your business in a way where it's productive, right? That is difficult. It is something that requires consensus. It's something that requires a large concert of people coming together and agreeing that as a country, this is how we develop, this is how we move forward. But it's very easy to in the halls of all our ministries, you have people, agents, who are always trying to secure debt for the country. It's very easy to go into those agreements. And debt itself is the feedstock. Is the feedstock of our even bigger problem, which is corruption. Meaning that, well, you take on a loan for a project. You know the project costs 1 cedi, but the loan aggregates it at 3 cedis. So you have 2 more cedis that can go into anybody's pocket. The NDC does it. The NPP does it. Maybe they would argue on the various degrees to which they do it, but that is the position we find ourselves in. We are able to take on debt because it's easy, and it feeds the corrupt political system that we have. What are the alternatives? The overriding thing in politics, and virtually everything we say on this platform, will not amount to much if we do not tackle the fundamental reason why we're here. We're here in this country because rather than a politics that is based on issues, we're involved in what I call the tribal hegemony, where these two parties have cleverly divided and partitioned the country into tribal zones that feed into their need to get power or to retain power. So until we break that up, until we all define our common enemy in this country is poverty and our need to get out of debt, and our need to act as an independent country and wean ourselves of our subservience to this debt system.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Kwekukwansa speaks for the CPP, and that brings us to the end of the first round. If I get you right, you were speaking about how the debt policy has been the main thing for dealing with crude oil, for food imports, and you think it's crushing our economy. Mr. Anda spoke about the preference for backloading and not front-loading as what is happening with the NDC. And then, George, you spoke about the benefits from the GET Fund. You spoke about tough decisions that this current government has had to make with respect to taxes. So that's the first round. Before we go into the second rounds, which lasts 5 minutes each, we want to just have a look at these 2 videos. It situates our conversation quite well. We have 2 people speaking. First of all, the Deputy Finance Minister, Cassiel Atuforson, who justifies government's tax policies, and then Dr. Mark Esibe-Yeboah, who faults government for imposing taxes but giving out huge tax waivers. So let's watch this, situate the context, and then we go into the next round. This is GH Debates on GH1 TV. Stay with us.
Let's us understand that, as I said, it's an investment decision, it's an economic decision. Okay, one of the ways the time will come that some of these temporary taxes will go is for us to grow the economy. And to grow the economy, you need investment like this to grow the economy. And obviously, growing the economy means additional revenue. And therefore, there's the need for you to lower some of the rates and possibly remove some of the tax handles. So this is some of the long-term strategies that we have in place. to diversify the economy, grow the economy in a way that revenue will grow, and where possible, remove some of these tax handles. So it's not that we are just taxing. We are not just taxing. In fact, in the end, I can say that I don't know where, anytime I hear people saying we are taxing, I don't think we are taxing. Currently, Ghana is doing tax to GDP about 17%. Our peers are doing 20%. In fact, we are nowhere near our colleagues are doing. Ghana can be compared to another middle-income country, in fact, a lower middle-income country. What percentage of tax revenue are they doing? And what is the alternative? If you fail to collect taxes, what will happen? What will happen is that you have to borrow. And then in the end, you and I, our kids, will pay. So that is what we have to understand. It's the reality. And I believe that we are not overtaxing the population.
You don't think that the thin spread in terms of concentration on pay as you earn and related taxes are the reasons we find ourselves where we are?
You see, PAYE, pay as you earn, is a progressive tax. Obviously, we have the lower band, and even those that get tax-free, and the fact that we are not taxing them, those that are entitled to 10% tax, those are entitled to 5%, those are attracting 15%, and those getting the upper band. Countries even tax up to 40%, depending on the tax, your threshold, and the band that you fall in. So we are not overtaxing. Our highest tax band under PAYE is 25%. It's not 40% like other countries have. Our peers, some of them are doing 35%. We've lowered it. We are coming down. In fact, we've even broadened the personal allowance 0% to give relief to the ordinary person who actually take home only minimum wage. To give relief to them. We are not taxing minimum wage. This is what we are doing. So we are giving reliefs out there. It's not just we are just taxing. No, that perception is wrong. We need to understand that the country, if the only way the country can grow is for us to collect revenue, for everybody to contribute something. The alternative will mean that we have to borrow to take care of teachers teaching our kids, to take care of the hospitals, which means there's no free lunch tomorrow. Our kids are going to pay for it. Is that what we want as a country? I don't think so.
We've seen VAT on financial service, VAT on the ex-depot price of petroleum. We've seen taxes on all manner of imported goods. There has to be a relook at all of these taxes, whether we are indeed taxing the way we should or we are missing something. Yeah.
Before the NPP left office, there were issues about which government policies were being implemented and its implications on the generality of the people. Now, government needs to implement projects, government needs to raise revenue. But how does this method of raising revenue run counter to what the NPP will do should it become the next government?
We'll start at where we are, but some taxes must go. For example, the energy sector levies, those have contributed to the increase in utility tariffs. The manner of taxes, street lighting levy, when you drive through the dark alleys, some of them must go. So we take a look at the taxes that have led to utilities going up. We scrap most of them. Then corporate taxes, you bring them down. Income taxes are 25% max. If there's a way to give some cushion, you bring some of these things down. I think on the production side, if you bring imported raw materials, you shouldn't pay any taxes because you're going to produce here. Your end product will get taxed. These are ways, we do it for the pharmaceutics. These are ways that we should look at to increase production, and the emphasis more on production and not on taxation. So production and not taxation. So if you are producing, then you are going to get tax rebates. If you are hiring graduates, then you are going to get tax rebates. Those are the kinds of discussions we are having right now, and hopefully when we are in office, that's the way to go, because I am surrounded by people who all believe in this lowering of taxes, and so we want to build a business-friendly economy, and you can only do that when you lower taxes. So I don't see any tax increases coming from anywhere. Yeah.
In the past, these have been the refrain when parties are in opposition, that we won't do this, we won't do this. But once they come into office, the same things that they kick against are the policies they implement.
Yeah, but I told you that over 8 years, the MPP reduced corporate taxes from 32 to 25%. So that's a clear example. If you ask the business person, they are happy that corporate taxes came down to 25%. We propose that we will further bring corporate taxes down, at least by the end of the first term, to about 22%. It will help. will help. I think the MPP is more business. You remember the refrain, golden age of business. So we are more interested in seeing businesses flourish, and no other way than bringing down taxes for them. So the National Fiscal Stabilization Level, which we brought when the economy was in crisis, we scrapped it before we left. So we are not just tax happy, because when the last National Fiscal Stabilization Levy was brought, I argued here that it should be for a year.
All right, so that was the MPP Member of Parliament, Dr. Marcus Beabwa for New Jabeng North. And well, you heard him. He says that why is government imposing taxes but yet giving out huge tax waivers? But early on as well, we heard the Deputy Finance Minister, Kassil Latoforsen, who justified government's tax policies. We're kind of kick-starting the second round now, and I want to begin with you, Sam George, the NDC Sam George. So yes, you're saying that government has had to make all of these tough decisions to put up all of these, policies, tax policies that we see. But how are we able to create that sustainable tax regime for national development?
The key to that is widening the tax net and making sure that more people are paying direct taxes and not indirect taxes. Because right now, basically, what we have to do is we're focusing more on being able to get more people to pay through indirect taxes. If you look at just prelim figures from SNIT, you realize that you have just about 1 million people, or about 1.2 million people, who are actually contributing to the SNIT scheme, the SNIT scheme, which tells you that close to that number are just about the people who are paying direct taxes to government. And out of that, about 650,000 of them are government workers on the civil service. And so then it then raises the issues that where do we sit as a people? How do we expand the tax bracket? But then there's proven track record from this NDC administration. We looked at the markets, and you looked at SMEs. Okay, there's the attempt to make the NPP look more business friendly. But for us, we believe that more Ghanaians, big business, how many Ghanaians are in big business? That's more multilaterals and international conglomerates that are making huge profits here, and we're talking about giving them tax holidays and tax breaks. But the ordinary Ghanaian, the Ghanaian whose country this is, many of them are engaged in SMEs, small and medium scale businesses. What are we doing for them? Under the NDC administration of President Mills, and it's continued under this administration, what we did and what our focus was to look at the SMEs and give, especially our women and small enterprises in the markets, give them a flat VAT rate of 3%, which enables us to expand the tax bracket because they're paying just 3%, and so then they're able to come on board. The more people you have paying, the less the burden on the larger, on the fewer people who are paying. Because once we widen the tax base or the tax bracket, it reduces the amount of percentage of taxes that everybody has to pay. But you see, I want to spend a lot more time discussing the issues about pension, because that appears to be what is the top trending issue at this point in time. Mr. Setekbe, Minister for Finance, is alleged by the NPP, and we've heard the flag bearer and his running mate, and I've heard Jojanda repeat that here, make the comment, is alleged to have made a comment that government had intended to tax pensions and allowances. In fact, Dr. Baumia has gone as far as suggesting that the NPP is going to be scrapping taxes on pensions. And when I heard him say that, I said, my goodness, what's going on here? Because you can only make a promise to scrap something that is in existence. At this point in time, there is no tax on pensions. So it just shows you the desperation of the NPP to score cheap political points, where the running mate is saying that his administration is going to scrap taxes that do not exist. What happened was, at a business roundtable, the Minister for Finance was asked a direct question by a journalist. Mr. Finance Minister, we're talking about the need to improve our tax collection. In other jurisdictions, pensions and allowances are taxed. Would you tax them in Ghana? And the minister says, look, in other jurisdictions it happens. Our tax laws in Ghana and our constitution doesn't allow us to tax it. So yes, it is perfectly legal to do it, only if you have the requisite legislation to go through with it. Our parliament is the only body that is vested with the powers to pass laws that will enable the finance minister to take taxes. Parliament has no bill before it. Cabinet has considered no such bill. to present before Parliament. And so the whole talk by the NPP, and I listened to a soundbite of the flag bearer, Mr. Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo, in Italy, where he made comments that this government is incompetent and confused. I think there's only one party that's confused here when it comes to the tax regime of our country and the issue about taxes, and that's the NPP. Because the NPP is promising the scrapping of taxes that do not exist. How can you promise people something that doesn't exist in the first place? That is the desperation we're talking about. And so as far as I'm concerned, this government is on track. You heard our Deputy Finance Minister speak about the fact that what we're doing is to give tax holidays to Ghanaians, the ordinary Ghanaian. The guy who earns minimum wage, he pays no taxes. And so this whole talk about golden age of business and giving reprieve to businesses, who are the businesses we're seeking to give reprieve to? International conglomerates that retire all of their profits and take them out of our economy and create the need that we have in our country? Or who is the real focus for the tax that we're talking about? Is it giving tax breaks to the ordinary Ghanaian who is earning minimum wage? Is it dropping the threshold? Look, when we introduced VAT and on payee taxes, when the NPP came in, yes, they're talking about dropping corporate taxes, but they raised personal income taxes. Payee taxes were raised. The thresholds were raised under the NPP. And so we must ask ourselves as Ghanaians, when we're making a decision based on taxes, who do we want? The government that is thinking about the ordinary Ghanaian and deciding that, look, the Ghanaians are the lowest echelons or thresholds of income generation, must be given exemptions, and we must tax more the corporate entities that make the huge monies, or those who are saying, let's give tax holidays to the big international companies and tax more the ordinary Ghanaian. It's a matter of choices here.
So George talks about widening the tax net. I don't know if you agree, if indeed you do. I'm looking at the issue of roping in the informal sector anytime we're talking about improving tax collection and widening that, tax net. What is the CPP's angle to this?
Okay. So I guess maybe we can demystify the words widening the tax net, because maybe in a large extent it actually feels like a big physical net. But then when you widen the net, what are you pouring? If you're pouring water into the net, it just goes right back out there, right? So widening the tax net, it's a good idea if there are processes that have been initiated or set up to do that. And what are some of the processes we can speak of? To widen a tax net is to create formal employment. So we can't speak about a formal sector, an informal sector, and a non-formal sector if we're talking about taxation. Everything has to be formal, meaning that there has to be a record of employment, a record of payment, and then a record of taxes. So the only way to initiate that will be a very thorough and detailed database that records every citizen and every activity that citizen undertakes. So if you have a national identification system that says you're a student, it's expected that by the time you turn 18, you'll be in university. By the time you turn 22, you're done with university and we are ready for some form of employment. Then the system tracks and finds out whether you're self-employed, you're employed in a company, you're running your own business, etc. You see, if we do not come back to the fundamentals, and the fundamentals always sound very simple and straightforward, but we do not arrive at the fundamentals. We always take the problems from the top. So there's always these ad hoc solutions to our problems. But if we come back to the fundamentals, we'll find out that it's really quite simple. A thorough database, one that's honest, not a program, not a national identification program where it's here today and gone forever. It's a thorough database that is very decentralized. And today we have greater opportunity to create a database. Let's say in a voter registration process, your biodata is captured. That's a database that's easily transferable to any other sector. When you sign up to get a passport, they take your biodata. That database should be synced with the voter identification system. When you go for your driver's license, I don't know whether it's being done now, but your biodata should be captured. It should be synced so that we all operate from one database. So that if you hold one card, let's say if you hold a driver's license, you should be able to register or vote with that driver's license because your biodata is captured. What is essential is your thumbprint and whether it corresponds to who you are and who you say you are, right? So that process in a very decentralized manner, where we have several districts and constituencies and sub-districts and sub-regions, if you can honestly execute a program like that, that is the beginning of looking at a program or a project or a system of widening the tax bracket. Once you do that, or once you do the database, then the next thing you have to do is to spare on production. Because if there's a wide tax net, and none of us are profitable, or none of us run profitable businesses, or we are not employed, how do we collect taxes? So we have to look at production. And in this country, what do we produce? We look at even the very basic go-to sector, which is agriculture, is facing great decline. We're talking about less than 0.5% growth in agriculture last year. So until we get serious, until we inject some capital, and when we say capital, everyone runs to foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment comes with conditions. They come with their own conditions in terms of how the business set up and in terms of how profits is repatriated out of the country. Virtually, there are no restrictions on if you're a foreign company and you invest in Ghana. When you make profit, I think it's something like negligible. It's about 2% that you retain in the country. The rest can be sent out. That is not the sort of investment we're talking about. We're talking about indigenous investment, where the country looks in on itself and looks at the various players it can put together. You have a national investment bank. You have the stock markets. You have banks, indigenous banks. You have businessmen who put money in treasury bills, etc. Once you create systems and projects where they invest in the system and create employment for our people, formal employment, I must say, for our people, then we begin to look at a broader tax net. It almost becomes instantaneous once you do all these things.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kwanzaa from the CPP. And to round up with round 2, we have Nenyi George Anda from the New Patriotic Party. And you have 5 minutes now to talk about the sustainability of any tax regime that you may be bringing in if you come into power.
Well, I think basically what we have said as NPP is that our tax policy is going to be back-end loaded. It's not going to be front-end loaded. We are going to have a tax policy that's going to incentivize and motivate production. We have a two-track approach, okay, as far as industrialization and mechanization of agriculture is concerned. And once we look at backloading the taxes, okay, you can then boost production as far as industry is concerned. You create more employment. You can boost industrial or commercial agriculture and boost employment as far as that is concerned. I'm sure you are aware that the MPP's mantra is that we are going to create the most business-friendly and the most people-friendly destination on the continent. And obviously, this ties clearly into that. Now, that said, I want to say something that our flag bearers running mate has been repeating, that our friends from the other side don't read. It's either that they don't read or they don't like to read. And my brother Sam George has just displayed that here again. And Kafui, I have sent to you the Income Tax Act, okay, of 2015, okay, and anybody can read it. It's there for you to read. I'll read certain portions of it. It says, Section 4, the income of an individual from an employment for a year of assessment is the gains and profits of that individual from the employment of the year or the part of the year. Number 2, it says a person who is ascertaining the profits and gains of an individual from an employment for a year of assessment or for part of it shall, A, include in the calculation an amount specified in respect of, and if I jump down to Section 6, subject to Section 94, a retirement contribution made to a retirement fund on behalf of an employee and a retirement payment received in respect of an employment. Now, clearly, this is English. It is in the act that the NDC has sent. Okay, it's an act. It's currently an act. So you cannot then say that you haven't said anywhere or you haven't suggested anywhere that you are going to tax pensions. You have clearly in this act shown that there are certain elements or there are certain aspects of pensions that you are determined to tax. And that is what September was tested. He tried to throw it out there, and then they realized that this thing is not working, and so they did a backtrack. You cannot have a tax act that contravenes what? You cannot have a tax act that contravenes what the Constitution is saying. And so, Sam, please, just go and check your notes, okay? It's okay to make mistakes. I mean, sometimes we learn along the way, okay? So to that point, NDC have made a mistake. They have passed a law that is in contradiction with the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana. And I'm happy that Sam himself has said, as Sam George himself has said, that the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana doesn't allow for any aspect of pensions to be passed. So free advice, just go back and go and check that bit. Now, we all know that right now, the reason why the government is taxing us so much is because they have borrowed so much, and there's a big hole. My brother from the CPP was saying that both parties are in the same boat as far as that is concerned. I don't think that that's the situation, because clearly you recall, again, Alhaji Dr. Bawumia has said it so many times, that this government is borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. And the amount of money that we are borrowing is going to collapse the economy. And that's exactly what we find ourselves in. For every 1 cedi of tax that we collect, I think about 37 pesos of that amount of money goes into service and debt. Okay, so we have a big hole. I agree with you. We have a big hole, but it's not both NDC and NPP. We have criticized that position. When Dr. Bawumia criticized it, but we were told that we are not reading. The same way as some George would say that the NPP is confused. Tickle yourself and laugh. Okay, the Ghanaians who are listening know the truth. We come here and we tell you the truth. For every 1 cedi of tax that we are paying, we are using 37 pesos of that to service debt. Okay? When Dr. Bawumia said, let us stop these borrowings and be a bit prudent, you said, okay? So clearly, what again do you want us to do? The only thing that Ghanaians need to do now is to vote out this incompetent, this insensitive, this business-destroying government and bring in Nanado and the NPP. And Nanado administration is going to focus on making Ghana the most business-friendly and the most people-friendly destination on the continent. And then Ghana would work again, as the late Professor Mills was saying, Ghana menya need to pay Frabio. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nyenyi George Anda from the NPP, wrapping up round 2 for GH Debates. Now this round belongs to you, so you've been watching, you've been sending in your questions, and we'll post them to the gentlemen in the studio. We're going to start round 3 with the CPP's Mr. Kweku Kwanzaa. So a few questions here for you. Well, the gentleman who is saying, Brighton Keta says, we should tell you that the CPP of Nkrumah is not the CPP of today. And so he's basically saying that your ideas are old. How do you respond to that?
To say that our ideas are old, then we need to kind of have some perspective. In the 50s, before independence, we fought for independence. Why did we fight for independence? Key in the pitch for independence is that we need to have self-determination. We need to be an independent country, manage our resources, control our resources for the benefit of our people. In 2016, are we managing our resources? Are we in control of our resources? Who controls our gold? Who controls our oil? What's the revenue from these minerals and things that we extract? Less than 5%. Our cocoa is forward sold, so we do not control the price of our cocoa. So we are still an economy that is largely subservient to Western forces and interests of financial institutions all across the world. And that is a colonial economy. So if you say ideas are old, then perhaps it means that everything is fine. And for these other two parties to work, they need to feed into this idea that everything is fine and everything is getting better. And the only way they do that is to borrow more money. So if the NPP says it has a solution, it's usually going to be a solution that involves getting better deals on debt, rather than sparing up production and actually making us self-determinant, indigenizing our natural resources for our own benefit. And the other, just to point out, apart from taxation, the next goal thing too is to sell the nation's assets. So currently, when you hear about inefficiency of ECG, ECG is virtually out the door as far as a Ghanaian company, as far as being a Ghanaian company. It's virtually being sold out as we speak, because that's the trend. Our telecom system is inefficient. Ghana Telecom is sold. Our banking system is this, and this is done. Ashanti Gold is inefficient, and then it's sold. So virtually, we have to understand that there's two systems: taking on debt and selling our assets. And that is the only policy direction of both parties on any given day.
If you says that you seem to be rather explaining why Ghanaians should be paying more taxes, and you're helping the NDC to win elections.
No.
What do you say to that?
No, I mean, that cannot possibly be. Well, then I must apologize for inferring that. I'm saying that Ghanaians need to produce more. Once we spur on production in the system, taxes become, it's almost, if we're all producing and if we're all making money and we're all making profit on that money, and we're paying the direct taxes on those things, we're not saddled with this issue of a high tax on your electricity, a high tax on your fuel, a high tax on duties and import charges, and a high tax on virtually everything we consume, including our talk time.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kwanzaa. Let's go to the NPP. This is a question somebody wants to find out from you. Kadri wants to find out from you. And it's actually a joint question. I want to find out from both MDC and NPP if they're aware of what their parties jointly did not long ago when the Energy and Mines Committees of Parliament decided to reduce government taxes and royalties on Anglo Gold Ashanti. What could be the reason for the parties in Parliament to take such a decision? We reduce the taxes to Anglo Gold.
I think sometimes you need to take some difficult decisions. With the energy crisis, these mining companies were under a lot of stress as far as running their companies were concerned. You see, the production process for gold, you start the machine, okay, or you start the smelter, and once your power cuts in the middle, everything that you have on the way is lost. And so when the power comes back, you need to go back and go and start again. So there were clear losses as far as these companies were concerned. And at the end of the day, you don't want these companies to be operating in the country where they cannot make profit and they cannot pay taxes, because that is like you really have just messed up the whole thing.
So these are tough decisions that have to be taken.
It was a decision that was taken to be able to get these companies to stand a bit or to cushion them a bit, obviously because of the challenges that they had faced from the energy crisis, the challenges that they had faced from the unstable CD, and then the economic situation that we're finding ourselves in.
Right.
I mean, you could take a decision that, listen, you'll be bullish about your tax regime. Okay, you still say that, listen, pay these taxes, let the industry collapse, send people home, and at the end of the day, what is the benefit?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that was basically the reason why a decision like that had to be taken.
Okay.
As to the amount of reduction that was given, that's a separate issue altogether. Okay,
but
so the principle behind it.
That tough decision had to be taken.
Yeah.
Listen, 80%
tough
of
decision had to be taken because of the mismanagement of the economy and because of the mismanagement of the energy situation.
Thank you for the clarification. You still have 2 minutes more, and most of the questions are for.
I thought you said this was or sir, would you agree? Would you agree with what I'm saying?
I was actually going to ask.
I'm just waiting.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So what is your point?
Let me and I hold this as my personal principled opinion, and I've made and I'm
it's not about personal opinions, right? It's about NDC NPP.
George, if you relax, I have made the point here that I personally hold an opinion that we're giving too much relief to big business at the expense of ordinary Ghanaians. The energy crisis was not as a result of mismanagement by the Mahama administration. It was as a result of lack of investment by successive governments, be it the Rawlings administration, especially the Kufuor administration. The Mills administration started a fixing of that problem. President Mahama is working on it. If there's a problem that has accrued to the Ghanaian people, it is not only the gold, the Anglo Golds and the big industries who suffered it. The ordinary Ghanaians suffered it. So if you're giving tax breaks, you're reducing taxes for the big mining companies that keep only 3%, in fact less than 3% of the revenues to us as our royalty. What are we doing for the ordinary Ghanaian? What tax break did we give to the ordinary Ghanaian? And that's why I disagree with the Parliament of Ghana in giving those tax holidays. You may say we are trying to be bullish with our tax regimes, but let's ask ourselves, we're giving tax holidays to Anglo Gold Ashanti to whose benefit? Government of Ghana? The revenues they make from gold, we keep less than 3% of that, or we get less than, in fact, about 1.2%.
Who negotiated
as
that?
Royalty. Well, it's constantly been reduced by successive governments. The last reduction, massive reduction, happened under the NPP administration in cutting down the amount of royalties that we get. You understand me? When Osajifo was president, we're keeping well over 60% of our revenue as royalties, okay? And successive governments have broken it down. Okay, this is not to make the CPP get excited because it is not a Osajifo in power today. But you see, let me just take 1 minute of your time and point out to George that George has actually tied himself in 6s and 9s and gotten excited, tickled himself, then laughed. He says, I don't read. George, I'm putting on record, you have not read the Tax Act 2015. If you have, the Tax Act is broken into sections, and Kafui and any other person watching us should please take the time to do this. Section Act Part 2, okay, which is under Division 1. It's called chargeable income, and I'll read it. It says, the chargeable income of a person for a year of assessment is the total of the assessable income of that person for the year from each employment, business or investment, less the amount of deduction allowed that person in this act. That's Article 2 of the Act. Now, or Section 2 of the Act. Now, if you come to Division 2 of the Act, which says assessable income, that now explains what assessable income is. He reads Section 4, which just talks about income from employment. So when he lists the pensions and all of the and contributions to pensions, it is not talking about taxable income. It's talking about income from employment. Now, if George took the pain to read that act, like we have accused him and his running mate and flag bearer of not doing, he would have gone to Section 7 of the same act. Section 7 of the same act is under the heading exemptions, and that is Division 3, exempt amounts. At Section 7 of the act says exempt amounts. 7.1, and let me jump to D. It says, 7.1 says, the following are exempt from taxes. D is pension. That's all it says. It's there in the Act. Act 896. And this is on page 14 of the Act. So if George Anda had been reading, he would not make the misleading comments he made here that the Act is flying in the face of the Constitution. And that is an affront to our Parliament, which includes MPP MPs who sat and passed the Act. But they did a good job. Parliament did a good job there. They read the Act. The Act never states that you should tax pensions. Section 4 that he read is just listing what are the incomes, what you will assess, what you will take as incomes from employment. He gives you what exemptions are in Section 7. Section 7.1d states clearly in black and white, if George had taken pain to read. And let me be clear, not to
George, you're out of time. You're out of time.
You don't concede? You don't concede?
Because most of the questions are directed at you.
Yeah. Because listen.
It's clear there that pensions are not taxable.
We all heard what Setekpe said.
Oh, now you're running away from the Act to Setekpe? I'm asking. He categorically makes statements about the Act.
Let him land
and said, I didn't read.
There's time.
You see,
come on.
If we're going to have a discussion, we should have a bit of respect for each other. When one person is talking,
I have no doubt he respects you.
When one person is talking, we should wait till the person to end and another person.
I thought we're in the third phase, which allows for banter.
Okay. No, I'm not sure that there's any banter as far as this is concerned.
No, there has to be.
It's actually allowed.
Please go ahead.
It's allowed in this round.
George,
so we can go. George, make that point, please.
Setekpe clearly stated, okay, that it is something that could be done. And the reason why he stated that was because of the provision that has been made in the pensions, in the Income Tax Act. You understand? That it's there clearly. Everybody can go and read it.
But when he reads that section which says exemptions, pensions, I mean, if that's in black and white.
Exemptions are discretionary. Okay?
In an act?
Exemptions are discretionary. It is not, when it says, when the act says shall, it makes it mandatory. You understand? Setekpe, to that point, if Setekpe knew that those exemptions were cast in stone, Why would he even then suggest that some aspects of pensions could have been taxed?
He never did.
Why would he suggest that? Does it make sense to you? Okay, clearly there's a big hole as far as income for the government is concerned. And the only way that this government wants to try and plug that hole is to increase the taxes that are being paid. They're taxing almost everything that they can lay hands on. Okay, I'm sure that even if they could tax the air that we breathe, they would have taxed the air that we breathe. Okay, now clearly this is not in line with the Constitution. And so there's no way that, if you actually heard what Kwaku Anyodoho came to say. Okay, what the Kwaku Anyodoho came on air and stated clearly that he will not sit down, okay, or the NDC will not sit down for any minister to take them into opposition. It was making reference to what Setepe has said.
Were you comfortable with that conversation, that comment that Kwaku made?
Well, clearly, Kwaku had made those comments on the back of the misreportage that had happened by sections of the media, which has
himself, he did not.
Obviously, which further too has been clarified. And that's why I'm saying that they don't just not read, they don't listen. If he had listened to me, he would have heard me say that the minister in his submission at the round table never spoke about taxing pensions and allowances. It was in response to a question by a journalist, a direct question. Will you do this? And he says it is legal in other jurisdictions, but not legal in Ghana.
Okay,
how then do you misinterpret this?
You could actually help this production if your production team would play what Setepe said. Okay, I think that if you call us to come to these debates, your production team should also do the bit of homework.
We know what he said. It's just interpretation of what he said.
No. Let the Ghanaians be the ones to interpret what Setepe said.
I'm sure they've heard it. We've heard it.
And so quickly, and this one comes back to you. So this one says that, and it's from Ken, from Adam Nana, and Ken wants to know exactly how the widening of the tax nets is being done, because he thinks that he's being taxed for everything, yet when he takes his car to the local fitter, the mechanic shop, he doesn't get taxed for the work that he does.
Absolutely, and that's why I spoke about SMEs and the desire by this government to expand the tax net to include SMEs. In fact, we started. When you go, that's how come, if you remember, about 2-3 years ago, we used to have this advert, the VAT advert, that talked about the flat rate, the 3% flat rate scheme, which we're trying to use to get as many informal and non-formal sector operators in there. And so you should have your barbers, your fitting shops, your seamstresses, all being able to contribute a flat rate of maybe say 3%, like we have the market women doing. And so that's the aim of this government, to expand the tax net to include our artisanal people. And that's why right now we're saying that artisans can actually make more if they get registered and get accredited. Now, once you get them to do the registration and accreditation processes, then it means you have them on a database. Then it means it's easy for you to proceed to pick revenues from them. Because right now, one of the major problems that our tax revenue agencies have is actually a database of those who are actually supposed to be paying taxes. In terms of corner shops and small-scale businesses, data is a problem. And so the focus of the administration now is to work on data collection, be able to identify these agencies and these small-scale businesses that are supposed to be paying taxes, and then rope them in on a scheme. If not the 17.5 threshold and all of that, but a 3% VAT, it's possible.
Well, Kwame Frank as well thinks that, and then quickly, Kwame Frank thinks that he doesn't see the point in paying taxes when he doesn't see the benefits of it.
Well, so, anywhere in the world, people pay taxes. And you see, again, as Ghanaians, we also have a responsibility as Ghanaians. Because you see Ghanaians who have lived outside or who work outside, and they're one of the first people, when it's the tax season, to go and file their taxes. In Ghana, we don't file our taxes. And that's a problem. So we also have a civic responsibility as citizens, okay, to also make sure that when we are outside the jurisdiction, we know the laws there bite. Maybe government must begin to make the laws bite. We need to start biting.
Okay, I'm going to end this conversation with direct quotes from Mr. Tekbe. Okay, so this is he was speaking at this event that was hosted. It was the Stanbic Bank Daily Graphic Executive Breakfast Meeting, and this is what he said. In a response to the public disapproval of the tax, he said, it's a thorny one because you're exiting it. But remember that as you make your social security contributions, they are exempt from tax, even though it's a part of your income. And then he continues to say, direct quote, perhaps we will have to exempt a certain level of income on the pension so that those who are fortunate enough to make fat pensions, they may pay a little tax. These are his words. And on these words, we'll end the conversation. GH Debates brought to you on
That
GH1
doesn't justify your
TV.
position.
And gentlemen, Mr. Kwanzaa from CPP,
Justify
Mr.
anything you
Anda
said.
from NPP. I wouldn't call you a CPP man for anything
Everybody's
in the
on
world.
CPP.
And
Everybody's
everybody's CPP, right?
Everybody's
I don't think they'll say so.
No,
Nyenyi George Anda from
And she quoted
NPP.
Osage
And Samuel
before we talked about
Nate George from the NDC.
Absolutely.
Thank you very
All
much, gentlemen.
Indeed.